Let's talk about a couple more Orlando Brown Jr. contract details that have recently surfaced. Former Chiefs safety Bernard Pollard and his welcome to the NFL hit on Travis Kelce. Look at 3 players who are in danger of being cut if they don't perform spectacularly well at training camp, and much freaking more. But first, how about those? What's up, guys? My name is Cole, aka the red-bearded bald eagle of Chiefs news, or sometimes known as the man whose beard is not green screened, because this is real, and I do daily news about the Kansas City Chiefs, so make sure to sub if you're new, hit that like button if you're ready for training camp to start very soon, and let's get into this video starting off with some more Orlando Brown Jr. contract detail news, because last night Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer had an article come out that mentioned a couple things on his contract offer from the Chiefs that were missed, and I believe this shows that the contract was indeed pretty competitive, and also shows the exact reason why it was turned down, which his agent basically mentioned last Friday. Anyway, here's what Albert Breer had to say. The Chiefs' negotiation with left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. will be interesting to look back on in 8 months. As was widely reported last week, Kansas City's final offer was a 6-year, $139 million deal that had a balloon payment in its final year. We all know that, I've been saying that, but then he says this: 2 relevant numbers illustrating Brown's guarantees were left out of at least what I've seen out there that was reported. The 26-year-old's offer included $38 million fully guaranteed and $52.25 million in injury guarantees. The former number is important because it basically reflects Brown's leverage. This year's tag for Brown is $16.66 million, and next year is $19.99 million if they tag him again, putting the 2-year total at just under $37 million, and just short of what was in the first 2 years of the Chiefs' offer. By comparison, Trent Williams, who was a free agent, got a 6-year, $138 million deal in San Fran with $105 million in the first 5 years last year. That deal had $40.5 million in its first 2 years. Brown's offer was also right in the neighborhood of what Ronnie Stanley got, which was a 5-year, $98.75 million deal with a $19.75 million average per year. And Stanley signed his deal as he neared the end of his rookie contract. So, on the Chiefs side of this, they offered something that was right where the top tackles are getting paid, even if Brown isn't quite elite at the position. And to pause here, he was offered like top 6, top 7 tackle money. So if that's what you mean by top, then okay. Albert continues saying, on Brown's side, at other positions such as receiver, the market changed quickly this offseason, which means asking for more had its justification, and that leaves everyone to wait to see what all this looks like in March, much of which will ride on how Brown actually plays. So there you have it. The deal looked even better than we thought, and Brown still turned it down. That rhymed. I think the main factor was that he really did want more guaranteed money. His agent basically hinted at that, but it was a pretty freaking good contract. I think what happened is Deshaun Watson's contract screwed everything up, or a lot of things up going forward, and now players are going to continue to want more guaranteed money now than ever before because Deshaun Watson's contract is 100% guaranteed. It's freaking stupid. Anyway, the more money that is guaranteed to a player, the more risk it is for the team. So, of course, with all that being said, it's one huge balancing act.
I'm gonna jump off. I got falling. Sorry, dude. You okay?
And then I want to chat about former Chiefs safety Bernard Pollard for a moment. He was drafted by the Chiefs in the second round of the 2006 NFL Draft and played for them for 3 years. And he's the guy who was basically hated by all of Boston for what happened in Week 1 of the 2008 NFL season when the Chiefs played the Patriots. Near the beginning of the game, Pollard actually hit Brady below the knee, which tore Brady's ACL and his MCL and was part of the catalyst of making rule changes to better protect QBs and their weak little knees. Imagine that. Tom Brady, part of an event that inspires a rule change. Very freaking wild. Even though I definitely agree with that one if I'm going to be honest. Anyway, Bernard was recently involved in a Twitter spat with Ravens QB Lamar Jackson, and while the purpose of this segment isn't really about the Twitter beef, it was pretty entertaining to watch Lamar Jackson act his jersey number 8 instead of his actual age. Here's the gist of it all. Ryan Clark tweeted out that he was upset Lamar Jackson doesn't make people's top 10 lists, even though he's a generational talent. And Bernard commented on Ryan's post saying, "It's a lot that can be said. He's definitely a top 10 talent, but as for a top 10 QB, I don't see it. But I believe he should get paid by the Ravens and should get top dollar. And then Pollard proceeds to list his top 10, which is suspect because he has Derek Carr at number 7 overall. Who does that? But at the very least, his top 4 makes complete sense to me. Anyway, Lamar Jackson saw this and proceeded to go to Twitter and belittle Pollard in several tweets, saying that Pollard sounds dumb AF. He had to Google who Pollard even was, found clips of Pollard dancing in the locker room from years ago and made fun of him for it, said he's no Hall of Famer, therefore his opinion basically doesn't matter, and a lot of petty stuff like that. Fortunately, though, Lamar ended up apologizing, and rightly so, and said he would never do it again. Pollard then said, "It's all good," and there you have it. And what I basically took away from this incident is that Lamar Jackson is a sensitive little baby in a grown man's body. But that's besides the point, because all this craziness on Twitter between those two had people reminiscing a bit about Bernard Pollard, including Travis Kelce, who actually commented on a clip that Pollard shared about a huge hit Pollard made back in college, saying, "You welcomed me into the league with one of these hits my first game, man." 3 laughing emojis. Pollard responded saying, "Somebody just sent me that vid the other day. I think I woke you up a little bit to help you be as great as you are." He was joking, of course. Then Kelce said, "Well, I know I never ran a slant like that ever again. And by now, you've probably seen the clip a couple times of the hit that Bernard put on Kelce in the first game of the 2014 season, which was Kelce's first official game in the NFL, even though it was his second year in the league, because as most of us know already, Kelce was injured his rookie year and was out for the entire season. Anyway, in that game against the Titans, Kelce had made his first ever catch in the NFL 2 plays prior, was feeling pretty great about himself, and then 2 plays later, was not feeling great about himself. In fact, was feeling the heat as Pollard hit him so hard that Kelce dropped the pass. And about this incident, Kelce was quoted a couple years later saying this: "As soon as I caught the ball, I was looking upfield and Bernard absolutely leveled me, put his helmet right into my sternum. I was flat on my back and the ball popped out. Fortunately, it was just ruled an incompletion rather than a fumble, but I got the point. You have to really get rocked like that a few times to develop the senses you need to avoid the big shots. And once you really get popped, you don't want it to happen again." And then Jake, not fake but real, from Bleacher Report put out an article yesterday about 3 Chiefs players who need an impressive camp to avoid being cut. And the author Jake, not from State Farm but from Bleacher Report, starts out by explaining the Chiefs have had more notable roster turnover this offseason than many prior, losing names such as Tyreek Hill, Tyrann Mathieu, Charvarius Ward, and Melvin Ingram. And yes, the Chiefs have filled some of those spots, but some are still up for grabs, and that's why training camp is going to be a fun watch to see who shines and who rises to the top. And some of those players are facing serious pressure to rise up, because if they don't, they are more than likely cut like a cable bill and will have to go bye-bye, or may hold on just tight enough to at least see a spot on the practice squad. But let's look at the 3 players mentioned here in this article that must have an impressive camp or risk getting cut. The first up is cornerback Deandre Baker. In 2020, he played only 2 games, but definitely saw more time on the field last season when injuries took place, even starting in week 4 against the Eagles. And this isn't a deal breaker, but it's worth noting that Baker does not really play special teams. He had only 50 special team snaps all season. And he also has a lot of competition come training camp, because there have been a bunch of additions to the cornerback room featuring drafted players like Trent McDuffie, who will start, Joshua Williams, and Jalen Watson. Then the Chiefs traded for Lonnie Johnson Jr. And on top of that, you have Snead and Fenton returning. So yeah, it's going to be a wee bit competitive, to say the least. I believe there's 11 cornerbacks at the moment with the late addition of Chris Lamons, even though this man is still facing criminal charges, and approximately 5 or 6 will make the active roster, with a couple more on the practice squad. So lots of decisions to make here, but as of right now, at least, I see McDuffie, Snead, Fenton, and Lonnie Johnson Jr. making the active roster, with DeAndre Baker and the rest fighting for the last spot or 2. The next player mentioned on this list is veteran safety at that, Deon Bush. They brought in Justin Reed and Bush during free agency, but also added Brian Cook and Nazeeh Johnson via the draft. So while this author, Jake Rill, lists Deon Bush as one needing to impress at camp to avoid being cut, I think Deon may actually be pretty safe here, because he brings a lot of experience, playing in at least 11 games in each of the past 6 seasons, and last season saw the 7th most snaps on special teams out of everyone on the entire Bears roster in Chicago. So yeah, he's not a guaranteed lock by any means, but at this point though, I'm going to disagree with the author here because I think someone like Nazeeh Johnson may be the guy with the most pressure to impress at training camp, at least when it comes to the safety room, because I think Uncle Dave will like having Deon around for sure, and he also provides some valuable experience at the safety position. The Chiefs will probably keep 4 or 5 safeties on the active roster, and as of right now, at least, I have Justin Reed, Juan Thornhill, Brian Cook, and Deon Bush making the active roster with the rest of the guys that you see here fighting for the last spot, and at least 1 or 2 maybe on the practice squad. The last player mentioned on this article is wide receiver Josh Gordon, who, yes, played 12 games last year, but wasn't much of a factor or contributor, totaling up only 5 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. But we all know he was still learning the playbook and didn't have a full offseason to train with the team, build rapport with Mahomes, blah, 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 and has since shined this offseason in OTAs thus far for what that is worth. But the author here says Josh Gordon could be in jeopardy of making the roster, especially because the Chiefs will need some of their lower tier receivers to contribute on special teams. And we've talked about this a lot on this channel here, and I've previously stated that Gordon does have a good shot of making the roster at wide receiver 5 or 6 slot as of right now, but they will definitely be looking for a receiver to contribute on special teams with both Byron Pringle and Marcus Kemp gone, as both of those players saw some decent special team snaps, specifically Kemp, who saw the second most snaps in special teams on the team, and that's what 73% of his snaps were dedicated to. So I currently lean MVS, Juju, Sky Moore, and Mecole Hardman as the 4 locks, then Gordon at wide receiver 5 at the moment, then someone like Justin Watson or DeRuse Fountain at wide receiver 6 for their special teams contributions. But since Josh Gordon was mentioned in this article as someone who needs to impress at training camp to avoid being cut, let's continue this train of thought and look at 3 reasons why this could be true and why Josh Gordon does need to ball out at training camp. The first reason here is age. Josh Gordon is 31 years old, though I think because he's been suspended so many times, it's actually preserved his body a bit and hopefully helps with his longevity in the league. But teams always factor age into consideration on some level. Obviously at 31, he still can perform at a high level, but there are some young, hungry guys out there like second-year player Cornell Powell, who has youth, a year on the practice squad, i.e. has a decent understanding of the playbook and rapport with other players on the roster, and the ability to play special teams, which is something Gordon would not be doing. And that's actually reason number 2, his lack of special teams play. And while Josh Gordon wouldn't be someone to play special teams, I don't believe wide receiver 5 and 6 have to play special teams as long as Uncle Dave has the spots filled appropriately via other positions. Remember last season, there just happened to be 2 receivers on the roster that did play special teams, but that can fluctuate a bit season to season. So while the lack of a special teams role could play a factor for Gordon, I don't think it has to. The third reason Gordon needs to ball out at training camp or risk being cut is because he sustained an injury during mandatory minicamp that Andy Reid actually said at first did not look good, but he came out on the better end of it, whatever that means. So if he's cleared for training camp, the recent injury is still on the minds of the coaches, and he needs to show that he's good to go and can still get after it. Remember, after all, that the NFL is a business, and if Gordon can't bounce back, he could be in danger of being cut simply for the fact that the coaches are looking for someone at wide receiver 5 or 6 to make immediate contributions on the team, and Gordon is still a fringe receiver on the edge of the roster on a 1-year deal with no serious long-term commitment from the team. Obviously, though, if he's actually still injured, injuries make things a bit more complex, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because if he was still actually injured, he could be placed on IR, or a couple other scenarios could play out like a settlement, blah, blah, blah. But I also want to give you guys a bonus reason here as to why Gordon may be in danger of being cut, and that reason is this: the Justyn Ross experiment. You see, I have this feeling that Justyn Ross is potentially injured and will be stashed away on injury reserve, PUP, NFI, practice squad. However they can keep this man, keep him safe on the team and develop him, that's what I think they're going to do. But what if I'm wrong and Justyn Ross shows up healthy and good to go at training camp and freaking balls out? I think a healthy Justyn Ross could actually beat Gordon out purely on the fact that Ross has years of potential upside and could be the UDFA steal of the entire draft. So there you go. The 3 reasons and a Justyn Ross bonus reason that Josh Gordon could be in danger of being cut by the team: age, lack of special teams play, and remaining healthy, in which age can certainly play a factor in that as well. But what do you guys think about all of this? Do you agree with any of the potential roster cuts mentioned? What about the specific reasons listed for Josh Gordon? And remember, if Josh Gordon does happen to get cut, he still could get put on the practice squad and could, in theory, if no other team takes this man, could work his way back to the roster throughout the season as injuries happen and all of that stuff. So just because I say he's cut doesn't mean he would be gone or anything crazy like that. But either way, definitely let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below. And let's quarrel about it down there like the calm community we are in the comments per usual. From here, though, I want to give a few super thanks shout outs, as there were quite a bit yesterday. Patrick McHugh sent over a 5 saying he subscribed and kicked in some cash toward the effort and told me to put a little towards beard maintenance. Well, thanks so much. It's not easy maintaining this bad boy, so I appreciate that a ton. Frank Smith said after 5 months of watching, he finally subbed, is ready for a membership, which I will be rolling out prior to the start of the season, don't you worry. And then he said he may be falling in love with me or my beard. How about those Chiefs? Well, man, I'm grateful for the sub and the support, so let's freaking go. Clark Duncan said he hopes Orlando signs the tag quickly, which I think he will. And then he lets me know he thinks the Chiefs will be 12-5, the Broncos will be 9-8, and the Raiders will be 7-10. Well, I sure do like that. And I hope you are spot on, and that is the case. Thanks for the 5, you legend. Richard Stanbridge simply said thanks, and to that I say, you're freaking welcome, and thank you, good sir. And then the Dre Max Show spotted me a coffee and confirmed that my beard indeed is not green screened. Yes, sir, you are right about that. It's 100% real. So make sure to leave a bearded comment or a super thanks to get a mention in an upcoming vid. Like and sub if you've made it this far but haven't already done so. And check out this video here, woo, which is from KCSN. They dropped it last night and covers some training camp offensive storylines. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?